This is a BSL video of the Access to Literature report by Jamie Hale, Artistic Director of CRIPtic Arts, and Ruth Harrison, Director of Spread the Word. It covers the findings and analysis, Part 2, funding and earning a living, creative opportunities, co-production, and emerging best practice parts of the report. The other report BSL videos can be found at https://www.spreadtheword.org.uk/projects/critic-rights-rights-the-word. The Access to Literature report is supported from public funds by Arts Council England. Funding and earning a living. Costing needs to be more equitable and no awkward processes for exemptions. I don't want to have to ask how to get an exemption when it's been advertised, but it isn't obvious how to claim, for example. Writers Survey respondent. 69% of deaf and disabled writers and creative producers said that the lack of paid work was their main barrier to accessing literature and progressing their creative career. 56% of deaf and disabled writers and creative producers and 52% of deaf and disabled audiences said that the cost of attending or participating in literature activity was a barrier. Cost is such a major factor for people who are often surviving on benefits. Writers Survey respondent. 19% of deaf and disabled writers and creative producers and 14% of deaf and disabled audiences said that the additional costs for personal assistance was a barrier. I would struggle to travel alone, yet it's expensive to hire a PA, not to mention onerous and scary if you've never done it before. Writers Survey respondent. Building on the challenges of accessing literature activities and aligned to a lack of availability of support for deaf and disabled writers to earn a living through their writing. I think more opportunities need to be created which focus on nourishing disabled writers in all aspects of their careers, not just polishing their manuscripts for publication. How to manage a portfolio career, how to pitch, how to write blurbs and queries, how to network, also mentoring by disabled authors, showing the ropes. Writers Survey respondent. Literature organisations' attitudes to funding access and investing in deaf and disabled writers and audiences were explored in the focus groups and free text questions in the survey. The intersectionality between funding and access provision was summed up by one respondent as a chicken and egg situation. For us, there are many small steps we could and should be taking, but we are not always aware of best practice. We're also conscious that there are bigger and more costly steps we need to take in order to be fully accessible, e.g. BSL interpretation for all our events. For these steps, it's a bit chicken and egg in that in order for us to apply for an uplift in funding to cover these additional access costs, we need to demonstrate an audience exists for them. Yet without spending that money, and presumably doing so over a period of time, we won't generate that audience. Literature Organisation Survey respondent. Cost was cited as a direct barrier by other contributors, particularly those from small organisations, and reflecting that the literature sector is, generally, not well funded. Literature is very grassroots, isn't it? It's very underfunded. So how do you make sure that a sector like that, which doesn't have massive pots of money, knows what can be done? Literature organisations focus group participant. How impossible it can be as a grassroots collective, whether or not disabled people are members, because you are reliant on people working as volunteers or in free venues. It is almost impossible to build access in. Because it's not affordable and they don't have the resources to plan, I think that this is a reality that we will continue to hear about. Literature organisations focus group participant. Topics of concern for writers, creative producers and audiences centred on the additional costs incurred as a deaf or disabled person as barriers to participation and engagement. There was an overall expression that organisations were not doing enough to level the participation playing field, nor to support the careers of deaf and disabled writers or audience members' engagement. From an organisational perspective, it was both a lack of funding to support access, which was compounded by many feeling that they didn't know enough about what access provision should be in place. From both perspectives, there was agreement that literature, as a sector, tends to be underfunded. Creative opportunities. I've been shortlisted for a few literary awards, and it was great, but that was it. It didn't lead to anything. I want linking up with agents and publishers. I was back on my own again with no help. I'll keep trying, but I feel it won't lead anywhere. Writers' Survey respondent. There was a strong call for more visibility at and opportunities to participate in literature events with public audiences. 73% of deaf and disabled audiences want more deaf and disabled writers' events run by festivals and venues, and 61% want more opportunities to be booked by festivals and venues. More publication opportunities were also called for. 69% of deaf and disabled writers want more publication opportunities, and 69% more books being published by deaf and disabled writers. Deaf and disabled writers also want chances to earn a living beyond publishing. 47% of deaf and disabled writers and creative producers want more commissioning opportunities. As for opportunities, they are oversubscribed, not specifically for disabled people, and tend to only serve a handful of the best writers, who get shipped off for publication, while the rest are left to struggle on without mentoring or support. We need to see a lot more focus on nurturing disabled writers and ensuring their stories get published. Writers' Survey respondent. Still a lot to be done around getting disabled authors published. Who actually gets published? Publishers. We've got only one story already, chronic illness memoir, just like this. We'll start to have impact in other ways. Really hard, even if you've got an agent and got through the barriers. Writers' Focus Group participant. Prizes were also popular. 67% of deaf and disabled audiences want more prizes showcasing and promoting work by deaf and disabled writers and poets, and 56% of deaf and disabled writers want more opportunities to enter a prize. When it comes to support for writers and creative producers, 49% said they want more industry network opportunities and development programs led by deaf and disabled writers and producers. 46% want more one-to-one mentoring and accessible resources, e.g. getting an agent, careers in literature. 44% want more workshops led by deaf and disabled writers and creative producers, and 41% more residencies. Just under half, 46%, of deaf and disabled writers and 40% of audiences said that there was a lack of activity near where they live. For anyone who accesses literature in different ways, for example, listening to audiobooks or writing by dictating or using alternative and augmented communication, there's very, very limited content and very, very limited consideration given. Writers' Survey respondent. The conversation in the focus group for literature organisations prompted one participant to reflect. I think that how you create equity and access is a wider issue of how the arts work in terms of churning out products and the expectation on what needs to be delivered. We might all need to switch that mindset. What happens when you really place access and well-being in the centre of the way that you work? It probably means we can't operate in the way that we do now. We constantly expect more and more for less and less. And that's a big shift to say, to make the way we work really accessible, we need to slow right down. Literature organisations, focus group participant. Co-production. I'm really tired of feeling like a box to tick for organisations who don't actually think about accessibility beyond really obvious things. And often not even that. There needs to be more of dialogue with disabled writers and audience members, and with a wide range of people. Not all disabled people have the same access requirements, and there needs to be a much broader approach. Writers Survey Respondent. The survey asked literature organisations if they were working in partnership with disability organisations or consulted with deaf and disabled people. 56% of literature organisations have never worked in partnership with disability organisations. No organisation said they always consulted with deaf and disabled people. 33% said they never consulted. Only 11% of organisations have provided staff and board training on inclusion and access, and 67% have never run training. Acknowledging the small numbers of survey respondents, the results still reveal how little access needs of disabled people are actively considered. In the focus group, literature organisations debated whether this lack of prioritisation of access provision might be a reflection of a wider diversity problem in the literature sector. We could bring this down to an issue of diversity in the arts sector, because if you're having it as an organisation to rack your brain on how to be more accessible, and there aren't enough disabled people on staff, this shines the light on maybe the lack of representation equals the inability to cater to wider audiences. Literature organisations, focus group participant. The deaf and disabled writers and audience members were clear that co-creation and co-production are the solutions to addressing a diversity of access needs and building greater understanding and engagement across the sector in an open and responsive manner. Work with more disabled writers so that a variety of experiences are shown and people don't have to become representatives for whole groups. Writers Survey Respondent. Actually involve people, part of the disabled community, in events and event planning. Actively seek input from disabled voices, and don't assume or infantilise us. We're disabled adults, not helpless babies. Writers Survey Respondent. The Writers Focus Group investigated how access co-production with deaf and disabled people might be part of the creative process. If people could see access as liberating and creative, we need an attitudinal change. There are conflicting access needs, so we need to continually be having conversations. Writers Focus Group participant. Emerging best practice. The survey asked deaf and disabled writers, creative producers and audiences for examples of good practice when literature organisations have met their access needs by making reasonable adjustments in an anticipatory manner. The following examples show that there is emerging good practice in the literature sector. Currently, it is not well publicised, so other literature organisations or publishers do not benefit from the learnings. Libraries' online events, including creative writing events where detailed information is shared before an event, including rough timings, breaks, activities. They offer contact opportunities before and after the event. They do an excellent introduction about the structure of the event and the technology used. They offer subtitling and captions on booking, and they have a relaxed approach to being on and off camera for participants. They also accommodate special requests. Writers Survey Respondent. Festival. tried hard to be good for access online, promoting screen sharing of poems and captioning, and organising a day to discuss how future events can be more equitable. Writers' Survey Respondent. Literature organisation has been good for me. The programme and information enabled me to arrange carers and support well in advance of the event. Writers' Survey Respondent. A lot of the things literature organisation are doing, online versions of in-person workshops, access lists, sending materials well in advance, etc. Writers' Survey Respondent. I won an award which involved doing a reading. I could tell from the title of one of the other readings that it would be very triggering. I emailed the coordinator and asked if they could make sure that my reading was before, not after the potentially triggering one, and if I might be able to read a copy of the potentially triggering one in advance, so it didn't come as a surprise. The organiser arranged this. She also checked in with me on the day and said she would accompany me if I needed to leave. This meant it was all fine and a great experience. Writers' Survey Respondent. I'm doing a residency at Literature Organisation. My health is complex, and at the last minute my GP advised me not to attend in person. The literary manager was brilliant. She was understanding without being intrusive. She arranged everything easily without making me feel like it was an issue. It's not just what is done practically, it's how easy it is to speak up and how we are treated when we do so. Writers' Survey Respondent. I found Publisher really helpful. They're publishing one of my stories, and I had to get my payment split up into increments to comply with the terms of my permitted work agreement. They were really flexible and didn't bat an eyelid. I'm terrified of being looked down on every time I say I disclose being on ESA and permitted work, so I really appreciated that understanding. Writers' Survey Respondent.